Good evening, dear students. We meet again. I am looking forward to your tests, 7, I think, the answer scripts. And today we have prepared class 8 that is on analysis. It's called philosophical analysis. Let's see what it holds for us. Yeah. So, this is the philosophy of philosophical analysis. And the idea here is that language is important. The careful use of language. That is the sum and substance of philosophical analysis. And the major philosopher here is Ludwig Wittgenstein. It's pronounced Wittgenstein. He was an Austrian born man who worked in Cambridge University and developed his philosophy during the Second World War, First World War, that period. I think from 1929 to from there onwards, he worked in the University of Cambridge, and he has given rise to this great philosophy of logical positivism and has influenced a lot of thinkers of his time, including Bertrand Russell. The main idea in philosophical analysis is the careful use of language. So if you contrast this with the other philosophies that we have learned so far, first we had idealism. So there it is the power of ideas. Second, we had naturalism, where we talked about nature and natural things. And third, we talked about Thomistic realism, which is a blend of both things to bring reality. And fourth, we talked of experimentalism, which is the philosophy of experience. And fifth, we spoke about, I think it was existentialism, where the individual matters a lot. So here, this is the sixth one. Here we speak about the importance of the careful use of language. That is the basic idea here. So careful use of language so that concepts are clarified. It has got a lot of importance here. Let us see what it means. Analysts contend that classical problems of philosophy, the great problems of philosophy, like Descartes' mind-body dualism or determinism or free will, all these great problems of philosophy, the metaphysical problems of philosophy, they are all very difficult to handle if you don't use the right language. So the form of discourse means intellectual exchange between dialoguing partners or between one person and a group. It's a discourse, it's an exchange of ideas. And this discourse, if it is not informed by the right and good use of the right terms, then it is very muddled. It is very confusing. So then you don't get the right idea and right meaning. The clarity of the idea is lost. So here we have to use language in a very careful way. That is the basic idea of philosophical analysis. So we have from Wittgenstein, he says there are two philosophies, ideal language philosophy and ordinary language philosophy. Let us see what they are. The first one is ideal language philosophy. It's called the Ideal Language Project, which says that philosophy is aimed at logical clarification of thoughts. Okay? Philosophy is not a body of doctrines. It is not a set of ideas, but it is a process. It is a process of argumentation. It is a process of dialogue. It is a process of arrival at the truth. Okay, so it's a process, and it's not a body. It's not a body of ideas. It's a process. Philosophical work essentially consists of elucidations. In this process, we elucidate things, we elaborate things, we clarify things. This is the basic idea of philosophical analysis, of the ideal language project. Philosophy does not result in philosophical propositions, but rather in clarification of propositions. So a proposition here means a statement of something predictive or something proposing. You're proposing something. A proposition is a proposal. So when you propose something, it is the clarification of that proposal that matters. Philosophical analysis does not propose anything new. Please understand this very important differentiating factor about philosophical analysis. It does not propose anything new. It takes the propositions of other philosophers and analyzes the meaning of every language, every term used. That's the idea of philosophical analysis. Without philosophy, thoughts are, as it were, cloudy and indistinct. Its task is to make them clear and to give them sharp boundaries. So, without the right use of terms, the right use of language, the ideas are somewhat cluttered, confusing, and cloudy. They do not give us clarity of meaning. So the task of philosophy, according to the Ideal Language Project, is the task of sharpening the boundaries and clarifying the idea. Wittgenstein criticized ordinary language and spawned the movement of logical positivism, which claimed that the meaning of a statement is identified with the empirical experiences one must have in order to verify it. Here, there's an important term called logical positivism. Logical positivism, it is the idea, a new term, but it is not very new for us, because all it says is that empirical analysis, empirical world is important for when we analyze language. Empirically based statements are important. It is only the overuse of empiricism in analysis. That is what logical positivism really means. It's a fancy term, but nothing much to worry about. So logical positivists devise an inclusive logical system, so statements are not verified by empirical, are not verifiable by scientific criteria, are meaningless. So the empirical method of understanding ideas logically, that is what is holding primacy in analysis. Empiricism is very important, just like naturalism. Ethics, theology, and moral duty become problematic. So subjects which are descriptive, which have got metaphysical ideas, which are not verifiable, become problematic. Philosophers were divided into two groups, one denying that non-empirical language could be cognitively meaningful, and the others claiming meaning. So somebody says that there are two camps in philosophical analysis. One camp says that ordinary language can be used with very specific terms. You have to be very careful with the use of language. They are empirically based languages. And the other thing says this is empirically based languages are not necessary. You can use ordinary language also. Let me give you an example. Suppose I take from scripture a word like Lion of Judah. Now, Lion of Judah in scripture has got a very specific meaning. You can look at it empirically, you can look at it non-empirically. Actually, the meaning in the scripture is mystical. The Lion of Judah refers to Jesus Christ, who will come and rule in the book of Revelation. But if you look at it empirically, it just means lion, which is an animal, and Judah, which is a city. That's all the empirical idea here means. So there are two camps of philosophers who say that you cannot use a non-empirical language. Another camp says you can use as long as there is meaning. So later, Wittgenstein proposed the ordinary language project, which held that ordinary language is sufficient to understand if it was carefully used. So there is ideal language project and there is ordinary language project. Ideal language project you saw is clarification of ideas, and ordinary language project says you don't have to be that specific. Only thing, you have to be very careful with the terms you use. So you can use ordinary language, but you have to use those terms carefully. That also is all right. So ideal language and ordinary language. There are no educational aims, normative educational aims in analysis. Now, by its very nature, this philosophy of analysis does not have epistemological implications, or does not have axiological implications. We have seen until now that we were looking at these ideas from 3 points of view. One is metaphysics, the second is axiology, and the third was epistemology, knowledge, reality, and values. This is what we were seeing. In the case of analysis, only metaphysics of analysis is concerned. We are not worried about the axiology or the epistemology, because it does not lend itself to those areas. So there are no normative educational aims. Normative means no norms. It does not prescribe anything, any norms for education. Analysis does not do that. Only clarification of norms propounded by others. So the educational norms which come about in real life, those norms which are propounded by others, those norms are analyzed by the analyst. But the analyst himself does not give any his own norms. For example, now John Dewey in Experimentalism says, teachers should provide real life experiences to students. You may recall, we studied about learning by doing, which is very important to understand the subject. It's a fundamental theme in experimentalism. So here is a statement which brings that out. It says, teachers should provide real life experiences to students. So the analyst will take this experimentalist idea, this statement, and say, what do you mean by teacher? What do you mean by real life? What do you mean by experience? What do you mean by student? This statement is pulled apart and then analyzed in a micro analysis, and what each statement really means, each word means, what is the thrust of the idea. That is what analysts do. Analysts would go into a debate as to the meanings of terms. So analysts would debate what are the pros and what are the cons, and what does it mean, what does it not mean, what is the clarity, what is cloudy, what is clear. They change the emphasis, and all that they do by debating amongst themselves. They provide a useful function because many of our ideas, even in the Bible, have to be clarified, because it is subject to interpretation, and the right interpretation is very important for us to know. So analysts provide this forum for us to debate and to look at the different perspectives within a particular idea or a statement. No contribution to curriculum or pedagogy. So we saw by analysis, analysis is a philosophy that does not talk about anything to add to curriculum or to the method of teaching, pedagogy. Analysis does not do that. Analysis only analyzes the statements of other philosophers. Okay, so we have a small picture here, that is the philosopher William Frankenna. He's got a schema for analyzing any philosopher. So he says he's got five boxes. The first box, he says, a philosophy should have a statement of ends of ethical or social life. Any philosophy should have a statement of ends of ethical or social life. Then it should have statements of human nature and structure of the world. What are the means and what are the ways in which the education can take place. Then it says there should be a list of qualities to be produced in students. Okay, these two, the statements are the ends of educational life, the goals of educational life, of ethical life, and the ways and means which are there in the human world. They should both come towards a list of qualities to be produced in students. Then there are factual and scientific statements about how to produce the desired qualities. This is from the empirical world. And finally, there are statements recommending what to do and when to do, how to do the practical aspects of how to achieve the ends of education. That is, this is a schema of William Frankenna. I just put it because it is a useful tool for you to have to analyze any educational philosopher. For our example here, we shall take the philosophy of John Dewey, which is familiar to us, and let us, in terms of this framework, let us try to understand that John Dewey's philosophy. So here it is, Analyzing Experimentalist Philosophy. Okay, so here in A, we have to be well educated. The goal of life, the ethical goal of life here is to be well educated. John Dewey would agree with that. The second thing, the ways and means, what is obtaining in the world, it should be activity-based, learner-centered, and community-oriented. This is what the ways and means of doing John Dewey's experimentalist philosophy is. Then, what are the list of desirable values to be brought up in the student? A practical bent of mind, a mind which is active, a mind which goes into action. That is the quality we want in a student. So these two things, A and B, bring together the practical bent of mind. And then if you look at the empirical world, the integrating aspect of education, how the practice of integration of education helps, and together it comes to the idea of what to do. In the end, how to become well educated. Don't be a spectator in the classroom. We saw that in learning by doing. Do the project work. So do your action online, actual action, and get the job done. So this is the way of elucidation of John Dewey's philosophy in terms of William Frankenna's model. William Frankenna's model helps you to analyze any educational philosopher in terms of these 5 areas. I found it useful, so I'm sharing with you. Okay, finally, we evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of analysis. R.S. Peters, a philosopher, has said that analytical philosophers should place basic ideas under the analytical guillotine for giving clarity and precision to educational ideas. So here, on the right-hand side, you see a blade which is hanging on top, and then there's a wooden box-like thing in the bottom with a round hole. This was used in the in medieval France to execute criminals. So what happens here is the criminal is asked to put his head through that hole, and then the guillotine comes down, the knife comes down to chop off his head. So that is the guillotine. Now he says, R.S. Peters says, analytical philosophers should place the basic ideas of any proposition under the analytical guillotine. The analytical process is a guillotine. It cuts out what is inessential. It cuts out what is superficial and only comes into what is clear. Okay, so it gives clarity and precision to educational ideas. So that is one of the strengths of the analytical process. But it has got also weakness. Although analysts claim that they do not prescribe norms and only clarify propositions, some, like Frankenna, betray one thing. And what is that? They betray the inherent biases, such as allowing only empirical content. So, William Frankenna's model is all right, or the analytical procedure is all right, but they are highly biased towards empiricism. Anything which is non-empirical is not acceptable by them, and therefore it is a weakness. That is the weakness of analytical philosophers. So that's the strength and the weaknesses. That's all. It's a short uh, class we have today, just 7 slides. I hope you have understood something, but it's an important idea. It has taken root in the 1920s in Europe, and was very influential at that time. And it has got some idea, some value, because it helps to clarify our ideas. Thank you very much. I enjoyed presenting this to you. I hope you've understood something. I look forward to your scores on your test 7, and meanwhile, you should study hard with all the subjects and with all the online work that you're doing. I know it is quite demanding for you, but do all that you can, and do your homework also, and show me your answers. I will do my best to evaluate them and to send you feedback. God bless you all. I enjoyed speaking to you.